welcome everybody, and thanks for making time in your schedule to attend this event. It was scheduled at just last week, thanks to Bill Hoffman and Sandy working together with our colleagues at APLU, and Scott being available for, I was kidding him a little bit, the third leg of a triathlon. So I presume you've done ESCOP, Oz, and there are people that went to Oz who still came here to hear you again. It's impressive. So this is the marathon portion of the triathlon. So, and Scott indicates he has the red eye to do yet tonight. So we're going to have, we're going to have Scott to say a few words to start. Then we'll just open it up for questions that people have. We prepared some, but I'm taking a wild guess, having heard you more than a few times, that you're going to cover most of them anyway. Well, Scott, move to this spot.
Okay. How's that? It's the right spot? Okay, good. Well, first of all, I appreciate you getting together. I know this was not on the agenda, but I had a couple things that are relatively hot topics right now that I felt like needed to be socialized now because of the time frame that I'll be sharing with you in just a minute. And I know you have other ways of meeting, and this was not normally scheduled, so thank you for showing up to this, and I appreciate this being shown to other extension directors who weren't able to join us today. I just do want to give you a quick update on the relocation. We are well into the middle of it. We've got slightly over 80 employees in Kansas City now. They have moved, and they seem to be relatively happy in the city. Kansas City is a wonderful place to live. It is turning out with low cost of living, at least compared to Washington, D.C. We have 19 individuals that we have left back in D.C., 6 national program liaisons who will, with 3 support staff who will be your contact when you come back to Washington, D.C. if you have a need for disciplinary or functional expertise to meet with. Their primary job, though, will to be as a liaison with other federal agencies. It's always been a challenge for NIFA, is how do we interact with the National Science Foundation and that EPA and other DOD and other federal agencies that do some similar work. It's always been on an ad hoc basis, and now we've got 9 people who are dedicated to trying to build those relationships, and I think that's going to pay off in the long run. So we'll be getting those names and their contact information out to you relatively soon, so you will know who to contact. I'll still be spending about half of my time in Washington, D.C., as well as another 10 or so individuals that you are welcome to meet with. But most of the staff will be in Kansas City. Now, during the transition and move, we lost a large number of our staff. I think that's been no secret. There's a lot of consternation during the discussion, particularly last year when we had this meeting. A lot of very interesting discussion at that point, but the move has happened. But as a result, we lost around 75% of all of our staff. So our main focus right now is in hiring new people. We're in a hiring blitz. That blitz is going to continue probably for the next year or so. We'll probably have a couple more rounds of hiring as we go through this process. We had a job fair just last week, which was fabulously successful. And we are finding it's easy to hire in Kansas City. Just to give you an example, in the past, when we would advertise for national program leaders, we'd get a couple dozen applicants. This time we had 600 applicants for positions. So we're finding that the numbers are there. We really haven't plowed through the applications yet, or at least I haven't seen them, so I don't know what the quality is. But when we had our job fair last week, we talked to some great individuals from all of the schools within the area, and they drove hundreds of miles around to get to Kansas City so that they could find out more about these jobs. We are hiring around the country. It's not just in that area, and we're hiring in all areas. It's not just those with a PhD in the social or biological sciences. We need business people. We especially need business people. That's where we probably suffered our greatest losses. HR specialists, communicators, you name it, we're hiring in those areas now. So we need everything. And if you have young people who are leaving your programs, who have just graduated, please send them our way. Make sure that they get in contact with one of us, and especially start by going onto our website, click on NIFA, onto careers from there, and a lot of information will be found there. Our jobs are rotating on and off the USA Jobs website, which is how the hiring is managed through the federal government. So if you don't see what you want there that day, come back the next week and the week after, because they may show up later on down the road. And if you only see 2 positions advertised, that is actually not 2 positions. We may hire 20 people under each one of those positions. It depends what it is. So lots and lots of jobs. Our hiring is our primary goal right now. The other thing we're spending a lot of time on is simply mission continuity. How do we get, let's get down to nuts and bolts. How do we get the money to you in a timely way so that you can do your work? We don't do any teaching, research, or extension. We support you because you're the ones who do all the work. So if you're successful, we're successful, and vice versa. So we have prioritized our work stream to make sure that the things that absolutely have to be done on time will get done on time. If there are things that, frankly, we can push back 2 months, we're going to do that too as we work our way through this. But what I'd like to ask of all of you, things will drop through the cracks. We don't even have enough people on staff right now to know what is broken. You're the ones who, when it breaks, please call any of us who are in the room today. Let us know that something has gone awry, and we can reprioritize that and get it to the top immediately. So particularly for some of the smaller institutions, the tribal colleges that have very little other funding beyond just federal funding, we don't get them their money on time. That's a big, big problem because we're laying off people. Some of the big schools that I've been associated with, they've got more flexibility, state money. They're used to not getting the money exactly when they think they should get it, and it's not been much of a problem in the past. So those are the types of priority decisions that we have made. But again, let us know if it's a problem. If something has fallen through the crack, if something's changed and we're not ready for it, we can make changes and we will work with you. So constant communication is going to be imperative right now. When I arrived a year ago, I've been on the job for about 13 months now. One of the first things I wanted to do was to look at NIFA, and we're calling it Reimagine NIFA. But what can we do with the organization to make it more efficient? We'd like it to be the best run organization in the federal government. We have a unique opportunity to make some changes right now, as you might expect, but it's something I'd wanted to do sooner. With a new director, we just celebrated our 10-year anniversary of NIFA, and it's time to look at the organization and what can change. Now, we got waylaid a little bit because of the relocations that has pushed all of this back, but now ready to re-engage in the process. We're going to have to hire a lot of contractors to help us through this. There's going to be a tremendous amount of data submitted that someone's going to have to sift through, and we don't have the people to do that right now. I don't know that we'd ever have enough people to do that for us, but we'll be working with others outside of the organization. Let me make it clear from the very beginning of this process that we will only do what the land grant community wants done. So we are not going to suggest anything that is against your collective will. This is meant to be a bottom-up process where those things that you think can make the organization better, more efficient, faster, quicker, leaner, whatever it might be, we will take those ideas and we will consider them then internally along with our contractors. Are they legal? I've been critical of certain functions in NIFA in the past when I was sitting in your place, and I've learned a couple of them. They are that way just because Congress tells us to do it that way. There are other things, though, that I think can be changed, and our goal is to be efficient and effective and impactful. This has nothing to do with trying to reduce costs. In fact, the Secretary has made it clear that any cost savings, whether it's due to the relocation or what we might do internally, those funds will remain in the organization and can get rolled back into your program. So the more efficient you can make us, the more money we can provide to your program. And that is one of our goals, to make sure that, number one, we do what you need done in a timely and quick way. And number two, anything we can do to free up funds to help manage programs that you're supportive, that are your responsibilities, we will do that. So we're on a very, very fast time frame. We have some inertia right now that I want to maintain. I'm asking that each one of the major associations, or the COPs or the communities, get us some information by the end of January. So it's very, very, in government terms, this is like lightning speed, but we want to keep us going because we do have some momentum right now. It's not going to take a huge amount of time, but I am asking your group to come together, and we're going to leave it up to Rick and others within APLU to help figure out how to do this. We'll provide some questions, but then somehow you're going to have to come together, whether it's electronically or maybe if you have a meeting coming up sometime during that period. It's not a great time for meetings, I know that. But somehow collect your ideas, and then we would like to have ECOP submit your essentially SWOT analysis to us, where then we will combine it using our contractors with other recommendations that we get from the experimentation directors and the academic heads and the 1890 schools and 1994 schools. It looks like now the foresters want to have a say in all of this. So we're going to take all that, integrate it along with our own ideas that will be generated internally. And then from that, we will develop some recommendations. Some of them we think we can do right away, just do immediately. There'll be some things probably that just stop is the solution, to stop doing that. There are others that will be more complicated, are going to take more thought, so we'll put together some tiger teams, but we want everything ready to go, all of the recommendations done by July 1st of next year. So some things will be implemented at that point, some will take more time because they're more complicated and you need more input. But again, you're the driving force of all of this, and that's why I didn't want to miss this opportunity, given the short time frame, to make sure that you get us your ideas. And particularly, as we just heard from some of the experimentation folks, your business managers especially, that's where a lot of the rubber hits the road for efficiency. They've got lots of ideas because they call me pretty regularly about how they think the world should be running. This is going to be especially their opportunity to have some input, because they are where the rubber hits the road, and I think they will have some excellent input for us. So we're asking for all of your help. Let's move quickly. I don't think there's any need to drag this out, because ultimately those ideas that I think would make us better, you already know. And we don't need to have large studies sections meeting over and over and over again. Probably one meeting done electronically. You can get us your ideas. We'll get coordinated, submitted to APLU, which they will then help organize for us. We'll receive all that information. I am going to have just to make sure we remain true to the process, we're going to have a group of 4 people that will watch over the process. They'll be kind of moral leaders. I haven't come up with a catchy name yet for them, but we're going to have 2 individuals who are long-term employees of NIFA, who know us well, know the processes, understand policies. We're going to have 1 new employee who came from a federal agency who will bring outside perspective, and then we're going to have 1 person from your community, from the land grant community, who will also be part of this. And so they're not going to do a lot of the work, but they are going to look at the recommendations that come forward to make sure that we remain on track and remain true to the mission of the land grant system. So as I said, this is your opportunity to rebuild a federal organization, which frankly does not happen very often. So we need to grab it, we need to run with it, and we need to make sure that we are in a better position to serve your needs going off for the next 10 years or so, until we get to our 20th anniversary. I'm just going to stop there. You're welcome to ask anything. It doesn't have to be about NIFA Reimagines or the relocation. If you've got other issues, please do so. We've got a number of our employees with us here today. Louis Tupas, who's one of our acting division directors. A lot of people have known him for a long time. He's a stalwart of the organization. Davida Kande, I always get your last name wrong. Did I get it right this time? Okay. She's working with a number of different things, but particularly with some of our international work. She's a rising star, and so we wanted her to get to meet a lot of people at APLU and make sure that she sees the full breadth of what the whole organization is all about. Josh Stoll, who is our Director of Legislative Relations, Congressional Relations. Bill Hoffman, Retired.
Happens all the time.
Sorry. Is the chief of staff. I think many of you have known him for a long time. And then last but not least, I want to introduce Parag Chitnis. He is our second in charge for NIFA. It's combining two positions into one. He is in charge of our programs, of everything in Kansas City at this point. So you will interact with Parag a lot. Now he's a scientist and a teacher at heart. That's his background. You'll never get too far away from that. But he's also has a lot of administrative responsibility. So take the time to get to know Parag, interact with him, and reach out to him frequently. You'll be meeting with him on a pretty regular basis, and I'm grateful for him for his willingness to step up and take on a pretty heavy lift during this time of transition. As you might expect, there's a lot going on with the change, but we also have to keep the gears of the organization turning, and much of that has fallen to him. We lost a couple of our senior leaders this last year. A lot of them, Meryl Broussard. We had two number 2 people in NIFA under Dr. Ramaswamy. Meryl Broussard passed away very sadly a couple of months ago. And then the other individual, Bob Holland, who was in charge of operations, he had a sickness in the family and he retired as a result of that. So given that and all of the loss that we have experienced due to the relocation, this is really, it's been a shell of an organization. Everyone is working 3 or 4 jobs right now to try to keep this going. And it's been really heartwarming to see how people have stepped up to try to keep this going, because if it fails, again, that's your success or your failure. So we felt like we didn't have much option. So with that, I'm going to stop and answer questions.
So
Dr. Latimer?
we'll just, we want to thank you again for joining us. And with Rick, thank you. So we'll just call for questions.
So could you talk a little bit about your budget priorities moving forward with NIFA and federal budget?
Okay. By the way, Dr. Latimer and I were lab mates together at the University of Missouri, so we have known each other since a long time ago. This NIFA Reimagines process, by the way, is not about budget priorities. It's about process, not the end result. So it's a complicated process to determine budget priorities. There's something called NIFA Listens, which is where we listen to our partners, which we consider our partners you. We listen to our stakeholders, which we would consider the families, the farmers, the youth, the groups that you serve. We listen to politicians, obviously, so the Secretary of Agriculture has certain priorities. We listen to collaborating organizations, and we listen to commodity groups as well. So all of this information has to come together to develop our budget priorities. So it's a very complicated process. But what I will say, I left out one group, Congress. The appropriators, they have an opinion of how money should be spent too. And we're quite faithful to Congress and their recommendations of how money should be spent. So we take all of this information. So if it's a congressional requirement, particularly mandatory money, it gets spent the way Congress tells us to spend it, which is a big part of our budget. We do have certain flexible areas, probably less than what most people think. But there we take all of this listening information, stakeholder input, political input as well, and utilize that to make these decisions. So I will tell you that this is above my level, but the REE mission area, which is includes ERS, ARS, NIFA, and NASS, National Ag Statistics Service. Dr. Scott Hutchins, who is the Undersecretary, manages that, and he's been thinking about priorities, and those priorities are going to affect us in the long run. And I want to give you a sense of what those are. They're not approved yet, they're still being discussed, but there's nothing particularly novel here, but here's the type of things that we're talking about. We're talking about production agriculture in terms of sustainable intensification. So growing more with less input. There's another one that would be food safety, nutrition, some of those types of areas. There's a third one on climate change. We at NIFA, we use the word climate change regularly. I certainly expect, I think you're going to see more funding in that area in the future if some of these buckets do get funded. But in that bucket would be climate change, but all the other environmental issues. There's also one on education, and that's that include how do we take information from those that have developed it and get it to the people who need it. So that includes all broad areas, whether it's extension, it can be four-year colleges, it can be tech schools. That will be another bucket of just information delivery. And then there's one more. Which one am I?
Also, you show the value-added innovation.
So what am I doing wrong here? Is value-added innovation. That's a hot topic right now for the Secretary of Agriculture. But then there's a policy one too.
Science policy leadership.
Yep, thank you. So anyway, that's, again, none of these are approved, but that kind of gives you an idea of the thinking within the department right now. And I want to keep mentioning that Congress has the biggest say in all of this, so we always look forward to their budget recommendations.
Could you give your name and where you're from, please?
Fundamental.
Could you give your name? Could you give your name and where?
Oh, I'm William Miller. I'm with UMass Amherst. I'm concerned about delays in the review of capacity projects. Some are up to about 60 or 90 days under review by NIFA. I'm just wondering if there was any recourse that you suggest as far as getting those reviewed and approved.
Yeah, Prague, would you like to? We've had this question before.
We are looking at how to streamline it quickly, because what happened is the NPS whom they were assigned left. So what we are doing is kind of trying to get them out quickly by just assigning to smaller number of people and getting them approved. And I think that's what is currently in place. So we should get
Just
that back.
be patient and not contact anybody.
Yeah, and then it takes time to answer that question.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay.
But please do let us know when there are things like this pending, like if there's a multi-state that needs to meet and needs to be prioritized, we will quickly do it.
Are there other questions?
Scott, Nick Place, University of Florida. I think you're aware of our target program where we send young scientists up to DC to look at different opportunities for funding and research and things like that. So what would be your suggestion with the relocation? Should we send them to DC, Kansas City? Should we wait a bit? What would be your recommendation?
Yeah, that's something we actually discussed and we're a little worried about. I think these are fantastic programs, and I think yours, you've done some analytics on it to be able to actually show at Florida that it did make a difference in the success of the faculty that were a part of that process. Yeah, they could come to Kansas City where most of the disciplinary experts will be, but then you also need to take these individuals into the congressional office and maybe hear from some commodity groups that are in town. Or you could bring them to DC and you would miss some of the disciplinary expertise, but you'd get the political background. So unfortunately, I don't think that's something that probably won't be as good as it was in the past. You may have to come to both places, which then you'll get everything you need, but it will cost you more money to get that done. So not everything is perfect. That's something that you and a number of other schools are thinking about now.
So one of the things that we are kind of considering, and most likely when we are sufficiently staffed, we do it is probably have 3 or some dates decided already and communicated to all of you. So if you are bringing in your faculty, if you can align to those dates, it will be easier for us to provide as much information and contact. So we can either bring some of the people into DC, or maybe we can have one in DC, one in Kansas City. So we can plan it more strategically to reduce workload on us while we are sufficiently staffing, while still providing the service that we need.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because we had discussed as an option of bringing some of our staff to Washington, D.C. to meet with your staff. So it's a moving target right now. These are incredibly valuable programs, in my opinion, so we want them to be successful. We'll work with you. on how we get these managed, but there are moving pieces to it now, so it's not going to be the way it was. Yes.
Hi, I'm Jody Jellison, another UMass Amherst. At another session, you brought up your, I don't know if it's plans or visions for a granting program that was specifically for starting off or at least not late term faculty. Could you address that and also perhaps think about having at least a portion of this program directed towards integrated projects, which have an explicit outreach or extension component? Because I know many institutions have folks that are essentially extension faculty, and it can be very difficult for them to get funding for integrated research, and yet they play an important role in the continuum of research to outreach.
Yeah, that's actually a good idea. How we structure that, the devil's in the detail on that one, but we all agree that the integrated programs are incredibly valuable right now, and where we see that, those are always better projects than others that aren't appropriately integrated. In fact, many of our programs now require that type of integration if you're gonna get a high enough score to be funded. What we were talking about, so this is where we just need to think about it more. We would like to have a program with a much, much higher funding rate than what we have right now for most of our programs. And some of them are down below 10%. So there are certain areas where scientists, whether they are applied and adaptive or basic researchers, the funding rates are just so low that you get rejected a number of times. So if it's an older faculty who's been around the barn a couple of times, you understand rejection, and you get back into it. You may have to write your proposal, rewrite and resubmit a couple of times, but eventually you'll probably get funded. But a young person, they submit their first proposal and they get rejected. The second time they get rejected. And the third, that's when you lose them. You've invested a lot of time and money in these individuals to make them successful, but because they have failed, given the low funding rates that they are for the pools they're competing in, they get rejected. That happens a lot. Their self-esteem is destroyed, and sometimes they become unproductive faculty. Other times they just leave and you never see them again. So one of the things that we would like to do is have a funding program that has a reasonably high funding rate that, you know, I haven't really thought about the science much of it. I've thought about more self-esteem. I want to make sure that the self-esteem of these faculty is kind of lifted up and built up from the bottom so that they can get a taste of success and keep them in the system. They'll have to be relatively small grants if we're going to have a high funding rate. So they're going to be different from some of the other things we've had in the past, but I think your point about integration is a good one, because we don't want to leave anyone behind in this process. And I'd hate for this only to be a basic scientist program than for our more applied and adaptive and even demonstrative types of science for them not to be able to participate. So thank you for bringing it up, and we'll give that some thought. Other questions?
Scott, Bob Chapter North Central. I'm just kind of curious about the process you described that you're going to go through here in the next few months about asking us for some input. You have an idea when we might see those 4 or 5 areas that you're particularly interested in? I mean, we can go out and just sort of ask the blanket question, what would you like NIFA to be looking like in the future? But if you had some categories that you can kind of feed us, that might help us shape that input. And my guess is we're going to bubble this up from the regions through ECOP.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to do it. Yeah, we've got the 4 questions already. They're essentially SWOT analysis questions, so it won't be anything that you're, oh, I didn't see that one coming. There are questions that you would expect to be asked, but we'll get those out within the next week or 2 because, you know, the longer we wait, the less time you have to do your job. So yeah, well, we're already thinking about that. We're going to have to work through APLU and how we get that information to you.
Thank you. Chris Watkins, Cornell University. I know you'd be disappointed if SDRI didn't come up. I'm interested, I know there's some debate as to whether it is desired. I'm not talking about the continuing resolution, but philosophically, whether there should be a matching program or not. I'm interested in your philosophy and how you stand on this.
So I'm only speaking for myself at this point because this is a congressional requirement. And it is going to be solved, by the way, I'm pretty sure. I'm not in favor of the matching requirements. I understand that that doubles the money in some people's minds, but how that can be used. But what we saw in this last round where the matching requirement was required is that a lot of the small schools, a lot of the small programs couldn't come up with a match. So it advantaged places like Cornell. It disadvantages some of the smaller schools, and I did not think that that was a fair process. Now, we do have matching required all over the agency, and so that, you know, that part's not going to change. But for SCRI, and there are a few others, citrus greening fell into this. I would prefer that there not be a match, and it looks like there won't be. In the future, there won't be.
Carolyn Wiggins, Cooperative University. I'm just curious as to the status of the plan work process. Is there any update on that?
So it's the revision of plan of work. I think it's currently going on. Okay. And I think the idea was, I think they're having a meeting with Rick and kind of to brief and some of the extension directors so that they know what is happening. Many of their interaction, the group that is actually making those revisions, were with the business people, those who go to NARA. And I think what we are now trying to do is to make sure extension directors and experimentation directors are also involved. It's also about 5 years since the plan of work, the external group of experts made. And I think that's something that we'll have to start and quickly get that feedback so that we can be agile in improving plan of work.
We did have a discussion at our EDA meeting last week. And our interest is making sure we understand how this interfaces with the panel of experts that we talked about, Scott. And so we're actually sort of on hold right now until we have a better sense of the composition of that panel before we reach out. And I think we don't really want to be asking our directors and administrators twice. We'd like to be able to do that once. So right now, I think I'm catching Mr. Raghavan, Albert, that this was a question we had before we move forward.
Yeah, and we don't want to ask you twice as well, and so we have asked that question already, and we're doing our best to make sure that we're efficient in how this is addressed. The panel of experts does need to put it's a requirement that that be done, and so we've got these two parallel processes that have a lot of overlap, and we're going to try to find ways to make sure that they are one and the same.
This is Jackie Wilkins, Ohio State University. Very logistical, and I apologize, but I have you here, so I thought I would ask. We just finished up with our civil rights review process, and we're in the process of submitting our status review reports. That whole unit, I guess, disbanded, and we were given a contact name to submit that. Is there a secondary name we should be including so that if we don't hear back from the individual that's name we were given, we have some, I guess, documentation of the fact that our report was received?
So we have a detailee in from another organization. His name is Kevin Smith. I don't know if that was a name given to you or not, but it should be sent to him. He is the one to officially receive it and act upon it. So yeah, we've got 3 or 4 civil rights reviews in kind of the same process, people asking, who does it actually go to?
We did send it. We haven't received any response.
You can probably copy when you send something like this to me or Daily Bob.
Go and copy Imperator. But Kevin is the main contact.
And Bill, if you could look into Ohio State specifically and get back to her. Yeah, by the way, for our civil rights, yes, we lost everyone in our civil rights compliance office. So we have a detail in for a couple months. So we got minimal capacity right now. We're trying to do a little bit of hiring in that area, but ultimately we need to look at a full-time permanent person. We just, I think that one has been advertised already.
Yes.
So we are into it now. Hopefully sooner rather than later we get filled, because we do have certain, as you already know, certain obligations to review programs on a regular basis. Yes, sir.
Yes, many of us are concerned about maintaining the prominence of NIFA, you know, at the level of an NSF or NIH. And so could you share with us a little bit of the thought pattern and some of the things that are going on to make sure and ensure that the prominence is going to be maintained and grown and moving forward with the move and the other many changes that are occurring?
Yeah, the question was about the overall prominence of NIFA. And you may even be referring to some other federal agencies as well, that ERS that are moving. When I was hired, I certainly had that concern. I want to make sure I wasn't coming into an organization that was going to be de-emphasized. So I had that very direct conversation with the secretary. He assured me that that absolutely was not true, that any money, that whatever process there was, whether it's reorganization, would remain in the organization. The budgets weren't going to be impacted unless it came from higher up above him, which has not happened. Our budgets have been growing, not shrinking over the last couple of years. So I personally felt reassured that that was not the case, but I know the public perception and public concern. I think it's pretty broad. So far, we haven't seen any of it. So I feel good that up until this point, that's not been an issue, but I'm watching for it. I trust the secretary and what he has said, but I'm always, what was it Ronald Reagan's thing with the Russians? Trust but verify, something like that. Yeah. So whatever. Yeah. So I want to see it, and I want to see continued interest. I hope to see continuing growing budgets during this time. I want to make sure that things like climate change are not de-emphasized. None of this has happened yet, so I have no reason to share any concern with you, but I'm watching for that.
Anyone else?
Okay, well, appreciate your time.
Let's give Dr. Amos a round of applause, please. Thank you and have a good evening.